Hello everybody, welcome to a cooperative approach to web design. With us today is Elliot Harmon from TechSoup Global. As a staff writer at TechSoup, Elliot writes content to educate nonprofits and public libraries on effective use of technology. He has degrees from the University of South Dakota and the California College of the Arts. And also with us today is Jim Walker from BigCar. Jim is founder and executive director of BigCar, a nonprofit community creativity organization based in Indianapolis. Walker, a former newspaper journalist, also works as a public artist, photographer, and writer. In 2010, Walker led BigCar's Made for Each Other community art series, reaching 8 neighborhoods with a variety of projects that engaged adults and children in creative activities designed to help their communities. Walker is also a member of the Indianapolis Cluster of CEOs for Cities, a national project focused on helping American urban centers. One of his passions is innovating great ways to help cities through creativity. And also with us on chat today is William Coonan, also from TechSoup Global, and I am Kyla Hunt, your facilitator for today. So really quick, today we're going to talk a little bit about who TechSoup is, and do some thank yous for people who made this webinar possible. Then Elliot is going to go into web design basics, followed by Jim Walker's presentation on his organization's website, bigcar.org. And then at the end of this presentation, we will be taking some questions from the audience. Throughout the presentation, please submit those questions in the questions pane. We will be taking a look at those, and we will be reading them audibly at the end of the presentation. We will try to get to as many questions as possible, but if for some reason we do not get to any, you can email the presenters or you can submit those questions to the community forum. So really quick, a little bit about who TechSoup is. TechSoup is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. As of June 2010, TechSoup served more than 127,000 organizations, distributed more than 6.3 million technology donations, and enabled nonprofit recipients to save more than $1.8 billion in IT expenses in 33 countries around the world. TechSoup is part of TechSoup Global, which is working towards the day when every nonprofit, library, and social benefit organization on the planet has the technology, knowledge, and resources they need to operate at their full potential. I do want to take a moment to thank a few organizations and individuals that made this webinar possible. First up is the Pepsi Refresh Project. For a little bit more information about what the Pepsi Refresh Project is, I took this quote from their website. So you have an idea to refresh your community. You invite people to get behind your idea and vote for it. If your idea is approved, Pepsi will help you make it happen with funding from a Pepsi Refresh Project grant. I do want to mention that voting for accepted submissions will begin again on November 1st at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and will conclude on November 30th. This reflects a 30-day extension in voting to allow the millions of people impacted by Hurricane Irene ample time to coordinate their entries. And for more information, please visit www.refresheverything.com. I do want to mention that Jim, one of our presenters today, is a Pepsi Refresh Project grantee. I also want to thank Darian Rodriguez-Heyman, who allowed us to use the same title of this webinar that was the title of a chapter in Nonprofit Management 101, a complete and practical guide for leaders and professionals. We will be sending out this short link to the Amazon listing for this book. And with that, I am going to go ahead and get Elliot started, but before we do that, I do want to take a couple of polls. So let's go ahead and do that. The first one will be, how would you describe yourself? And so go ahead and select whichever you think that you would describe yourself best as. And again, the options are executive director or management, IT staff, accidental techie, volunteer, board member. And I'm going to be closing the poll in just a couple of seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I'm not sure if you can all see this, but it looks like the accidental techies have 31% of our participants. ED management has 26%. Volunteer board members is 22%, and IT staff reflects 21%. So that's a pretty evenly distributed audience that we have today. And really quick, I do want to do one other poll, and this is going to ask, when was the last time you redesigned your website? And just to read what the options are, the first is before 2000, the second, 2000 to 2005, the third, 2005 to 2010, and the last, within the past year. And as the results are coming in, it looks like 2005 to 2010 and within the past year are blowing the rest of the contestants out of the water here. I'm going to close this poll in just a second. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's see if I share this. You should be able to see the results now. Before 2000 has 5%. 2000 to 2005 has 18%. 2005 to 2010 has 46%, and within the past year has 32%. So like I said, the majority of participants, their organization's website has been updated within at least the past 6 years. All right. And with that, I do want to give control over to Elliot. So I'm going to give him the floor. And Elliot, I'm going to mute myself so you can unmute yourself.
Okay, thanks a lot, Kyla, and thanks a lot to everybody for joining here. Kyla mentioned that the Nonprofit Management 101 book, which I contributed the chapter to on web design, and what I'm going to be talking about here pretty closely follows that chapter, but of course there's a lot more information in the chapter. Okay, what we'll be talking about briefly is, 1, what is your website's purpose? 2, setting and measuring goals for achieving that purpose for the website. 3 is conceptualizing your website, which I will explain what that means when we get there, but basically I think of conceptualizing your website as everything that you do before you actually get around to making the website on your computer. And finally, we're going to be talking a little bit about content management systems. This is a lot of grounds to cover, and I want to be sure that Jim has ample time afterward to talk about Big Car. So we are going to go through this relatively quickly, but fortunately there are going to be questions at the end, and fortunately we're going to be pointing you to a lot of additional resources. So be patient as we speed through this, and we will try to get to your questions. Okay, what is your website's purpose? I take a really simplistic approach to thinking about what your website's purpose is, which is really that it comes down to the audience and the desired outcome, what it is that you want your audience to do when they visit that website. And ideally, all of this should be tied to your broader organizational goals and strategy. You know, I think that there was a time not too long ago when most organizations thought of their website more or less as kind of a flyer for the organization that existed on the internet instead of existing on paper. But now we're really moving to a time when websites can and should be much more closely aligned with your programmatic goals and with the metrics that you use for measuring the effectiveness of your programs. Okay, so who is the intended audience? Potential donors, current donors, volunteers, evangelists, customers or beneficiaries, people who are actually going to use the organization's services. Of course, for just about any organization, the temptation is to answer everyone. My kind of half-joking response to that is, well, you know, most nonprofits' websites aren't actually very appealing to anyone, so making one that's appealing to everyone is going to be a tall order. My slightly more serious response to that is to say that, yes, every nonprofit has a complicated mix of different audiences. Still, the process of actually profiling those audiences and thinking about what each of those audiences is really looking for when they go to your organization's website and prioritizing those to a certain extent, that process is going to inform the design process infinitely. Now that you've talked about who the audience of the website is, the next step is, okay, what do you want those visitors to do when they get to your site? And I put some examples there. Make a donation, though that's a kind of problematic one, which we'll talk about in a minute. Sign up for a newsletter, sign up for a service, send to a friend. Really, what I see as kind of the key thing about these is that they're all things that you can actually measure. I'd say nearly every nonprofit, our purpose, among other things, is to spread awareness, though just purely spreading awareness is something that it's not very easy to measure. So think of these, the technical term for these is conversions. You might hear me use the word conversions a few times. That just means what you want the audience to do. Think of those as indicators that that awareness or that message has been spread, and then you can optimize the website to get the most out of those. When talking about the purpose of websites and talking about how you measure those conversions, I often find myself talking about two interesting commercial websites. One of those is Mighty Putty and the other one is Apple. If you're not familiar with Mighty Putty, it's a sort of white putty glue that comes in a little tube and is advertised on television. If you're not familiar with Apple, it's a sort of white, shiny computer that comes in a cardboard box and is advertised on television during the more popular shows. And when you look at both of these websites, they were ultimately created with the same purpose in mind. Both of these websites were created above all else to sell a product. And in both of these websites, the moment you look at the homepage, it's exceedingly obvious what the product being sold is. There is, however, a major difference in design philosophy between these two websites, and that is really what you see here. There is literally only one page at getmightyputty.com, and that page is the order form. The website was really designed with the idea that you're going to be making a purchase or not making a purchase within about 5 minutes of visiting the website. The Apple site, on the other hand, is very different. There's no order form here. In fact, if you're bored sometime, try just going to apple.com and clicking on whatever the featured product is and see how long it takes you to get to anywhere where you're entering your credit card info. I tried this the other day. Right now, the featured product on there is the new iPhone, and it took me about 19 clicks before I got to anywhere that I would actually be putting in credit card information. So the difference between these two websites is not in what the ultimate goal is, but it's in the amount of work and the amount of intermediary steps that come before that eventual goal. Here is the funny thing, and this is kind of one of the main things that I want to underscore. I think most of us would look at these two brands and say, well, Apple is the cooler, hipper brand. That's unattainable. My nonprofit can't try to be an Apple. In reality, most nonprofits that try to be Mighty Putties fail, or at least fail in that respect. When I look at many, many nonprofit websites, I see them kind of built with the idea that I would want to make a donation within 5 minutes of learning about a nonprofit, and that's not true for most of us. So I would encourage you to think instead about, using the website as a place for longer-term relationship building, developing trust with the audience that can lead to donations or any number of other things. In other words, try to be an Apple because you probably aren't going to have the perfect 30-second sales pitch of a Mighty Putty. To look at this another way, think about what happens when a guest comes to visit your organization. This guest might be a potential donor or a potential volunteer. Maybe it's somebody from a foundation. Whoever it is, it's somebody that you want to get on your nonprofit's side. Think about what you would do with that person the day that she visited. Think about the people that you would introduce her to. Think about the stories that you would tell her. Think about the things that you would show her. All of which would go into building that relationship, which may or may not eventually lead to the conversion. Wouldn't it be a disappointing visit if she showed up and all she saw were this big donation box? But this is more or less what a lot of nonprofits are. They are a big donation box and not much other opportunity for relationship building. There's a person who is sort of a political strategist named Ann Keenan, who wrote this pretty great piece about this problem. She was describing an experience that she had right after she'd signed up for a mailing list. And she wrote, the minute I hit submit, a giant donate button appeared. Whoa, all of a sudden we'd skipped from flirting to something a little more intimate, and I felt icky and strangely violated. And I think that that's an experience that we've all had, both in the for-profit and nonprofit sectors, so don't be icky. Now that we've talked about kind of big picture what the purpose of the website is, the next step is kind of talking about, okay, how can you turn that around into measurable goals? I put here set specific measurable goals. Visitors should sign up for our email newsletter. That's a good goal. A better goal might be 10% of referrals from XYZ campaign should sign up for our email newsletter. The difference between those two goals is that one of them is measurable. After the campaign is over, we can look at the results and we can say, this succeeded at this goal or this failed at this goal, so here are the things we'll try for the next campaign. The goal without that specificity attached to it, it's very difficult to say whether you've succeeded or failed, or to say what you might try to change in the future to meet the goal better. Once you've established that goal, I see the next step is building the website around it. To use the example of the newsletter sign up again, every piece of content, be it a profile of somebody in the community, be it some kind of testimonial about what your organization does, is there a way that every piece of that content can tie back to that conversion of signing up for the newsletter? Sometimes in web design people talk about the one-click rule, which means literally that a visitor should never be more than one click away from whatever that conversion is, because each additional step that you add to the process, you're going to lose some people. Now, like any rule, this is a rule that can be broken, but think about it first and break it intelligently. The next step is actually, now that you've talked about that audience and what that audience is supposed to do when they get to the site, it's to kind of turn that into really more specific profiles of who that audience is and what they would do when they interact with the site. And user stories are a kind of good way of thinking about this. They're sketches of how and why users will interact with the site, and they're ideally based on interviews and actual intelligence you have on that audience and stakeholders. Here are some examples of those. Adam learns about our nonprofit by word of mouth and finds our site through a Google search. He reads the story of our nonprofit, watches a testimonial video, and signs up for the email list. Bonnie visits our site to respond to a fundraising letter. She chooses from 3 donation levels and makes a donation. Carl notices an interruption in services. He visits the site and immediately finds an updated service schedule and contact information. All of these are specific based on different audience from the audiences that we talked about earlier. And they're also measurable. You, as the site administrator, will be able to look and see whether the users that matched these profiles actually got what they were looking for or not. Once you kind of have those user stories, you can start to build that into an information architecture, which is a simple outline of what content will appear on the website and how it will be arranged. For the chapter in the book, I made a really simple example of information architecture, but in fact yours might not be much more complicated than this. We have 5 headings: about us, events and services, news, contact us, donate, with some subheads under each of those headings. And key questions to talk about with your team at this point are, does the information architecture reflect the most important user stories? And this, in a way, this really does come down to prioritizing. Like we talked about earlier, we do have multiple audiences, and there is going to need to be a discussion about prioritizing which transactions are going to be the easiest or most immediately findable on the site. Will new content or sections need to be added in the future? Who will create the content for each section? Being a writer, I'm a big fan of content and content strategy, and these are not questions that should wait until the last minute. Now that you have that information architecture, the next step is sort of a wireframe, a visual representation of the elements of the website. This can be a Microsoft Word document, an Illustrator graphic. This sample one here, I just made it in Photoshop, or even a pencil drawing. And in fact, I'll say that some of the most gifted designers I've ever met do lots and lots of sketching out on paper before they ever touch a computer. Now, if you are, say, working with a contractor on your website and you show them your user stories, your information architecture, your wireframe, the things that they might come back and suggest to you might look very, very different from the wireframe. So it's not exactly a literal recipe for the website. It's more of a visual aid for talking about with the stakeholders, talking about whether this meets the needs as you've laid them out, whether this meets the priorities of your organization. So it's more of a visual aid than an actual step-by-step recipe for the website. Which brings us to content management systems. If that's a phrase that you haven't heard before, you might have also heard web CMS or just CMS. Those are more or less interchangeable. And that's a program installed on the web server that manages the website. And what's really kind of interesting about CMSs is that they sort of enforce a unified look and feel and design across the entire website. If you decide, for example, that you're changing your logo and you want to change the color scheme of the website to match the logo, then you don't need to go through and change each page with a content management system. The CMS enforces that consistent design across the entire website. And most of them have a lot of other goodies built into them too, things like blogs, forums, e-commerce modules possibly, all of which will fit that same look and feel of your website. With most CMSs, and definitely any CMS that I would suggest you look at, a non-specialist can keep the website content up to date. That means you or somebody else on your team who is reasonably computer literate can do 90% of the upkeep of the website. Now, depending how ambitious your needs for the website are, and depending a little on how willing you are to get your hands dirty, you may well need somebody to help you with that initial setup. But the goal really should be that you don't need some kind of fancy specialist or contractor to keep the website up to date on a regular basis. Here's just to kind of visualize that a little bit. Here's my very simple sketch of how a CMS works. Up there in the upper left, we have the editing interface. It's what they call a WYSIWYG, or what you see is what you get interface, similar to the one you have in Microsoft Word. And then the CMS turns that content into the HTML, the actual code that's then read by the web browser. So that's kind of a graphical idea of how a content management system works. Now, the big four open source CMSs are Drupal, Joomla, Plone, and WordPress. Those are all free, and they're all relatively popular in the nonprofit community. There are consultants who work primarily or exclusively with nonprofits who work extensively in those four CMSs, and also because they have a big pool of users, lots of people have built extra modules and things for them. Our friends at Idealware put together really the definitive guide to those four CMSs for nonprofits. I put the URL for it there. That outlines the pros and cons of each of those, and it also includes a directory of consultants. So it's really a great resource I would encourage you to download. Now, all of that is not to downplay the proprietary CMSs. I wrote there, if you use a proprietary CMS, understand what you're paying for, which means that a good reason to use a proprietary CMS would be that it has functionality that you need. Perhaps it's using the Microsoft SharePoint CMS because it's able to work with your dynamic CRM, or there's other proprietary CMSs out there that are specifically made to work with other CRMs or fundraising databases. Those are good reasons to use a proprietary CMS, but again, understand what you're paying for. And with that, I think I'm at the end of my segment, so I'll pass it back over to Kyla.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Elliot. I really appreciate that. So I am going to go ahead and give the presenter control over to Jim so he can go ahead and get his section started. Again, keep putting those questions into the questions pane, and if you have any or you're having any technical problems or you really have any content related questions, feel free to ask at any time. So Jim, I'm going to go ahead and give you control. Okay,
Okay.
looks good to go. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm kind of, I guess, doing sort of a case study of what a website can be like for a nonprofit. Big Car, trying to. Big Car is a small nonprofit in Indianapolis. We serve the community here in different ways through education and art, and the description here you can read. We formed in 2005. We have 4 staff people now, but operated for the first several years with just a couple of people. I was primarily maintaining the website and updating it with the help of a web designer who helped build the site originally. And as mentioned, we were a 2011 Pepsi Refresh winner. So I just wanted to highlight some of the aspects of what we found important when we were thinking about our site and what we wanted it to be. And for us, we really wanted to have our site be a self-serve site that we could go into and update and run and kind of have it be fresh and keep it going, and not have to worry about calling someone up or emailing someone and saying, can you change this or fix this? And so the CMS that we used right off the bat was movable type, and I think that it was an open source version of movable type. I know there's one you can pay for, but I think we've been using a free one. And as you can kind of see here, all this code is sort of generated through uploading things. And for the first few years of doing this, I didn't really understand what I was doing that much, and sort of figured it out and figured out what the different code things kind of did, and when I messed them up, what they would do. And that was sort of all done without any kind of training. The guy just sort of set me up and let me struggle and fail until I figured it out. So what we update the most with our content management system is stuff like the schedule. So every day that something new comes up, at least every few days I get in there and update the schedule. That would be the one that you can see on the left there. And then the main menu part that goes down the middle of the site is the place where we update with news, put flyers up so that all the latest events and things that are going on are really clearly indicated there. So what we wanted to really go for when we got our site started was to make something, and I feel like this is a really important, is something that's attractive to people and also something that fit us. So we really wanted the design of the site to match our organization and not to be sort of shoehorned into the template that a designer had. And so we came up with some concepts and worked with a graphic designer to come up with newer versions of our site as we sort of went along. This was what our site was like when it first opened, or when it first went up in 2005. It was basically where that question mark is. This is off an archive. There was our logo, and that was the whole thing. And so it was really obviously very minimal, and there wasn't a lot to it, but we just wanted to get some information out there. And it didn't really fit with the sort of energy that our organization had and all the things that were going on. But it did divide up into the categories of what we're going to do, and it was sort of like the wireframe just sort of sitting on a page. So we had our original About section that was live, and some of these other things that were here. And our organization changed drastically from the beginning, and so our website sort of changed to match that. So here's sort of a different where we are now with our About, and it's definitely adds a lot more to what we were doing. So the second version of our site was this one, where we brought in more color, added different navigation along the top and on the left, and started to have the things that I could update using movable type to bring in new things that were going on and keep the freshest news and the things we wanted to highlight the most there in that spot on the middle of the main page. And you can see the difference between that and where we are now. We came back in. It's still the same basic structure, but we moved a few things around, added some new buttons on the left, changed our navigation on the top, and really brightened up the color and reflected the redesign that we had done for our organization. The website hasn't been rebuilt. We just kind of gave it a new skin and a new look and kept the same functionality and the same content management system. I'm planning to, as a group, we're working on creating a new site, but for now we're just sort of working with the one we have here. One of the things that we felt was really important was to keep it personal and to have it have a lot of faces. So these are just a few of the artists that you can see if you click on the art, the collective page. And since the beginning of our site, we've tried to have a lot of faces and a lot of people to keep it really feeling, to have that human sort of touch to it because of the distance the technology kind of creates. So a key to us from the very beginning was to have our website be flexible, and to be flexible as a group, and to be able to change our navigation and adjust from where we started. These are only the three things we had on the left on our side navigation, and we had a forum on there that we ended up getting rid of because it didn't work out very well. So sometimes we would just add things, to change things, drop things from the site, and keep it evolving along with us as an organization. So these are the ones we added. One important one was to have a way for people to make donations. We didn't have that there before. The same is true with the top navigation. When we first started as an organization, we divided our programming between writing, art, music, and art shows, and we also offered some public relations support to other nonprofits. That all changed later on, and we sort of adjusted to reflect our new approach, which was really to talk about who we are with the collective one, and then to show what was going on in our gallery, what was going on in our community art projects, and to have a holding place for all the multimedia stuff that we had been doing to document our projects. And then the one consistent one that stayed was the contact button. So for us, we wanted to keep the site easy to navigate so people wouldn't get lost or feel like they were overwhelmed. And sometimes I think our site now still has a lot of options, maybe too many, and but we try to keep it clean so when you look at it, you're not overwhelmed with options, and the focus brings you in to the main stories that you want to cover, and the most important news, and then kind of put a hierarchy of things that we wanted to make sure that people stopped and looked at. One thing that I think we found that's important and that we're interested in maintaining in our next site is to have this big button that's the home button that can always get you back to where you need to go. One of the major changes that happened for us since we have kind of gone along with our site through the years is to making it connected to external things like YouTube and just other ways to connect with people. So right off the bat, we had the BigCar listserv that we kind of created for our newsletter, and that was something that we found to be really important right off the bat when we got started in 2005. And then we've continued to do that and use that as a way to communicate with people. We also felt like from the very beginning, connecting with other organizations that were our friends and using links as a way to sort of share and find others who had links on their page as a way for us to sort of cross-pollinate and connect, and it also helped with friendships with other organizations, local and national and international. Originally, the way that we documented our shows and put pictures up was just through uploading pictures into directly onto the page. And so you had to scroll way down to see every single picture, and it was a pretty awkward way to look at pictures from our events. Now we use Flickr, and we host all of our photos on Flickr, and we can put this photo stream slideshow so people can see what the latest photos are that are uploaded on Flickr. And then also we use other external things like Evoca and Vimeo and YouTube and Scribd to host our audio, video, and documents like PDFs. So here's our just a bunch of our sets on our Flickr. And one of the things that we do is not only connecting out to these places, but we'll put on the photos, the videos, and the documents and the audio links back to the bigcar.org site to kind of get things going both directions. So when somebody clicks on a photo, if we or a set, we try to send them back to our website. We did this. Here's another example of how we had our video clips, and they were just uploaded. You had to upload these video files, which is a real pain, and would also be sometimes really slow for people to view. And now we just use these YouTube channels and Vimeo. And we found that it's really important to use to get pro accounts, and TechSoup is where we got our Flickr pro accounts, and that's been really important. And the Vimeo Pro and some of the others can really make a difference. So I feel like they're worth the investment. We also early on set up Facebook groups and Twitter for our bigcar, and use that as a way to stay connected with people, taking you to the bigcar group page in Facebook, and also taking you to our Twitter page, which is linked to Facebook. And there again, that you can link people back to your site from both of those as often as you like. So one thing that we really felt like we needed to do with the site was keep it fresh, and keep the news that you have on there up to date, and not leave things on the main page or out where people would see them that are more than a couple of weeks old. So like this story is about something that happened on October 6th, so it's going to need to go down pretty soon. And we kind of think about the dates that people see, especially on the main pages, sort of the way you would with journalism, where if it's old news, it's time for it to go and be replaced by something newer. But we kind of did an experiment for a while where we tried to be a daily kind of have daily content, because we thought we wanted people to come back every day, and I don't think that really ever worked out. And it was a lot of work, so we kind of created this daily comic that was based on things that people said to us or sent in comments, and then we would do these collage things, and that was kind of fun. But I think we did about 10 days worth, and then we quit because it was too much work, and we really didn't see that having a daily update was drawing people to the site. They would go when they needed information or wanted to know when things were happening. So the key for us is just to have an informative site, and one that has news and information that people need, but also information that people like the media could use, and to have a one sheet there that they could click on to get this sort of short scoop on who we are, and to be able to download and see that there's other media coverage. And this is also a good way for people to find out about what's going on with your organization even if they're not in the media. And one thing that we've been doing for several years is keeping our logo there on the site for people to download, because it comes up a lot when you're partnering with people, or you have some kind of a thing where a designer wants to use your logo to put on a poster or something. So basically for us now, we're sort of in this position where we're planning to redesign the site, and we want to go a little bit further in the direction that we've been going, taking the idea of sort of organizing this a little bit more and keeping it from being sort of overwhelming. And we've been looking at other sites, and I really feel like looking around at sites that you like, and sort of thinking about what you can borrow from them, and just doing research to sort of create a hybrid of things that you can use, ideas you can borrow. And this is an organization in Chattanooga, Tennessee, that has a site that we were looking at, and we like the simplicity of it. And this is sort of the direction that, with the redesign of our site, that we're going to go in, where there's a little bit less going on, even though I think we're probably going to end up working more with a slider like this, because I don't know that we're going to be able to give up having something on the main page that we want to highlight, because we're really used to that. This is a a partner organization of ours in Indianapolis that has recently redone their site, and so we're also looking at ideas from them that we want to borrow from them as we work on our site. So basically, those are the things that we are kind of highlighting with our site, and kind of where we are and our plans for the future. And I appreciate your time, and be happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jim. Yeah, it's really interesting to see how your website has been evolving along with the change of focus of your organization, and how that's really reflecting that. So that's great. I do think we have quite a few questions, both for you and Elliot. Really quick, let me get my fancy or not so fancy question slide up. Give me 1 second. All right. So let me take a look at some questions. First of all, I do want to go ahead and ask some questions that were directed towards Elliot specifically about CMSs, and it's asking about specific content management systems. So is Adobe Contribute a CMS, or what do you think of Plesk? Do you have any just opinions on either of those?
I am not familiar with either of those, so I really don't even want to try to make up an answer. We can certainly find some stuff about those and get information to you. Contribute is available through TechSoup, correct? Yeah, it is. So we can certainly send you some information about those, but I don't want to try to speak out of what I actually know.
Okay, cool. And we did have a question that was asking, do I need to go through a consultant to create a WordPress site? I mean, go ahead. Yeah.
I'll tell you my personal experience with this, because I've actually been playing with WordPress a fair amount recently. I'm starting a thing outside of work, and over about 2 weeks, I made a reasonably good site in WordPress that is functional. It's definitely not the most attractive site in the world, but it's functional. It's kind of like I said earlier, that how much of this you can do yourself depends partly on how ambitious your goals for the site are. It also just depends on how willing you are to get your hands dirty in this stuff personally. I have a pretty high tolerance for that, so I managed to kind of fumble my way through making a website. I don't know if I have a better answer to that than that. WordPress is certainly more user-friendly than some of those others, and there are lots of great free templates and things available for WordPress. I would imagine that most nonprofits would want somebody with a little bit more design chops than I have, for example, somewhere in the process of putting together a website. But I'm also a big fan of John Wayning things and trying it yourself.
Okay, cool. So this question is about CMSs, but it's really directed towards Jim, and they wanted for you to reiterate what CMS you're using currently and what CMS maybe you're looking to use in the future.
The one we're using right now is Movable Type, and I've used WordPress ones, and that may be the direction that we go. Movable Type has been fine. I think in the free version that we've had, we had a few hack problems or something that just was not good for a little while, but it seems like they've taken care of that. But I think WordPress is probably the direction we'll go in the future from what I understand.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. And this question, I think, whoever wants to answer this, maybe Elliot, we have somebody that says that they currently have a website created in Drupal, and it doesn't entirely do what they want, and the creator is no longer in the organization's picture. but they also have decided to start using a CRM. So there comes this chicken and egg question, which comes first, the CMS or the CRM?
So I'll try to take a stab at that question, and Jim should certainly feel free to chime in as well if you want to. I think it's possible that earlier on I might have kind of overstated the importance of CRM integration. You know, if there's a specific reason why you need CRM integration, that your constituents need to be able to log in for something, you know, specifically connected to your organization's services, then you would definitely want to look at putting together that solution in a unified way and probably getting a consultant to help you through that process. But for most nonprofits, I think that the importance of CRM integration is kind of overstated.
Okay, great, thanks. Sorry, I had a little bit of a glitch here. So Jim, did you have anything to add to that? Jim, are you on?
I guess I don't. I
Okay,
didn't
good.
even. I'm here.
Okay, cool.
I didn't really even know what CRM is, so I guess I do now. But I felt like the content management system was crucial right at the beginning, and I understand that the connection between. But for our organization, with being as small as we are, we really just needed to be able to keep it up to date. And I think one thing about, and I've heard that a lot about different people leaving who set up websites, or the people will have some students that offer to do it for free and then they're gone. And I think thinking through who sets up your website and how much access you're going to have is really crucial, because I think that ends up being a problem for a lot of organizations.
Hey Jim, do you guys use some sort of system for people who want to like RSVP or buy tickets for an event?
No, not something from the site. I think we've used like off-site services like brown paper tickets and things like that, but we haven't integrated those in with the site.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering. I mean, that's another integration question that would be worth thinking about for some nonprofits. I didn't know if that was a big issue for you or not.
Yeah, most of our stuff is pretty grassroots, so it's just like pay at the door kind of thing.
Okay, cool. The next question is, can we expect a website designer to also be a graphic designer? And whoever wants to take a stab at that.
I'm also not a big expert in like what the field of consultants looks like necessarily. There are many that do both. There are many that do various sort of combination of services. I would encourage you to look at that listing of consultants in the Idealware guide. I would also encourage you to look at a webinar that we did a year or two ago called How Much Should a Website Cost? That was presented by Alan Gunn, who works a lot with those consultants, so is much more kind of familiar with what's going on in that field than I am. But I think I interrupted Jim. I think he had something to say.
Yeah, I think that like with our site, when we redesigned it, the look was designed by a graphic designer, and we handed it to the web designer, and he worked with it. And I think sometimes those people are one and the same, and sometimes one is more interested in how things look and the designer aspect of it visually, and maybe the web designers sometimes are more on the functionality side of things. So maybe a collaboration between both, and maybe having both involved is a good idea if you can.
Right, and I feel like this question kind of goes with graphic design as a follow-up. And the question is specifically about Twitter, which should Twitter backgrounds be informative or just attractive? But I think that can go with website backgrounds or website layouts in general, if attraction or information should be the crucial thing.
Information should be the crucial thing. There's a story that I told in the chapter that you can see online too, that has to do with an organization where I have a couple of friends that had somebody build a website for them, entirely in Flash, and it was a super attractive website with pop-up menus and with all of those fancy things, but with this major problem that nobody at the organization knew how to actually update it. So it just sat there and got more and more stale literally for years. I think that I'm certainly a believer in, and I want to hear Jim's perspective on this as a artist and person who put together that site too, that there is a certain kind of simplicity with a certain kind of style and chutzpah to it that is the right way to go most of the time. Specifically the question about Twitter backgrounds. Quit putting lots of extra information in your Twitter backgrounds. It's annoying and it's not readable on a lot of browsers, and people can't click on those links because that's just a picture, so don't do that.
Yeah, I think that the simplicity is really important, and the Flash design sites. The other thing to keep in mind with sites that we're working on with the next round is that people are going to be viewing them on smaller devices all the time with phones and with iPads and things like that. So I think that even is further reason to keep them simple.
Okay, cool. And I am going to keep reading questions. I do want to point out that we have quite a few more questions to go through and only about 6 to 8 minutes left in our time. So if there are any questions that we don't get to, you can email us and we will try to follow up with you directly. And I will be sending out the emails afterwards for you to do that, or I will be putting it on the community forums, and you can ask more questions there, and we will try to answer any unanswered questions there as well. So to continue, we do have a question that says, our nonprofit has the IT know-how to keep the organization moving forward, but the main driver of the organization does not. For instance, we use Google Sites, have a newsfeed set up, but the few paid employees do not have the knowledge of how to maintain content within the CMS. So do you have any ideas of how to work with them to solve this problem?
This is always
I would
going
say training for everyone, but you can go ahead, Elliot.
No, yeah, I agree with that. This is a major problem that gets to something bigger than web design, which has to do with mission alignment between IT and the rest of the organization. Providing that training in a way that is useful to the rest of the organization, but that also providing that continual support and not having the IT exist just sort of on an island. So I think it is a problem on both sides.
Okay, great. I really like this next question simply because I think that this is something that we always talk about, collecting user feedback and collecting information about your community base, but a lot of times we don't necessarily know how to go about that. And so this question is, I'd like to know more about effective ways to collect user feedback and adapt or modify the site to better meet our objectives. And Elliot, you can go first.
This is a great question, and I talk about this a little bit more in the chapter, which I don't know if we mentioned this earlier. I would encourage you to get a hold of the book, but you can also read my chapter online. I think that when you are kind of assembling that team of people to work with on the website, that shouldn't only include people in the organization. That should include your volunteers. That should include sort of key evangelists for your organization in the community. When you include those people in the design process, something really interesting happens. You get their perspective as the big champions of your organization. And you also learn how other people who care about your organization talk about the organization. You learn kind of what their 30-second elevator pitch is about your organization. So I'm a big believer in those focus group meetings with kind of your organization's key champions in the community. There are also certainly things you can do with surveys. As most of the people here know, TechSoup is in the middle of a major site redesign, and throughout that process we've been doing lots of surveys of the community, and we've been doing lots of focus group meetings with the community. So I don't think it is possible to ask too much, and people do appreciate being asked.
Jim, did you have a follow-up to that?
Yeah, I agree, but for a small group, the focus groups are probably easier, like working with people that you have nearby. Yes, that I guess the main thing is when you're a smaller group, like doing a major survey would be a challenge in like compiling that data, but just talking with people who are close, like Elliot said, to your group is probably the quickest and easiest way to get it done.
Okay, cool. These next two questions I'm going to just kind of loop together. One is, how often do you recommend doing a complete overhaul of your website? And the other is, approximately how many hours would it take to develop, this question is for a skin for a website, but I'm curious about just developing a new website in general. And Jim, you can go first with this.
The skin for our site didn't take long at all. We just did the design to the right dimensions that the web builder gave us, and then we just sent that to him to put in place. So he might say it took a while. It didn't seem like it took nearly as long as it would to do a whole redesign. And most of that stuff, the big stuff, with the migrating over to a new content management system and things like that, are the longer term things that I'm sure Elliot probably has more of an idea on that than I do.
That time frame, it really does depend a lot on you know, how big the organization is and how ambitious your plans for the website are. I would encourage people to pad that time frame to include time for those focus group interviews and all of those sorts of things. If you can build a website in a month and then spend the next year kind of trying to warp your programs to fit that website, and that would not be advised.
Okay, awesome. So like I said, we do only have a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to ask a couple of more questions that came in directly for Jim. And any of the other questions that we don't get to, again, I put the URL for our community forum, so I will be trying to address a lot of unanswered questions there. So be looking for that. And in the follow-up email that I send out, I will be sending out emails that you can send up follow-up questions. So Jim, these are just a couple of questions for you. The first is regarding your past and future redesign decisions. Do you feel that the purpose of the site evolves with the design, or are the redesigns more to freshen up the look?
I think we're really happy with the look. I think the redesign is sort of, to go back to something Elliot mentioned earlier, to connect the site better with where we've evolved as an organization. So, and also to simplify. I think that sometimes when people have to navigate all over the place or go scroll down, that you lose that attention. And so we want to simplify to keep people from scrolling down, and also adapt to people looking at the site on smaller screens, and to make it easier to view on mobile devices.
Okay, cool. And then finally, how did you set up your donations page?
I think that is, geez, I don't even remember. The donations button on our site runs through, look, I think it just is it may be a PayPal link.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we just run that through PayPal. So all of our donations are handled through PayPal.
Okay, awesome. And so like I said, we are at the end of our time, so I do want to go ahead and wrap this up. Let's see. So again, Elliot and Jim, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation today. It's been really, really informative. I will attempt to do any kind of follow-up for any questions that we may have missed. And just as a reminder, we will be sending out the archive and the links for this presentation within a week. Using GoToWebinar, we we do need to get the archive into YouTube before I can send that link out, so it is a little bit longer of a delay, but we will be getting that to you, never fear. Also, be aware that we do have an upcoming webinar that might be applicable to this audience, which is short evaluations of real websites, and that's happening on Thursday, November 10th at 11 a.m. And I will be sending out this bit.ly for the registration as well. And during this free 1-hour webinar presented in cooperation with SAP, a donor partner of TechSoup, web design experts will take a look at a succession of real nonprofit and library websites. So be sure to check that out. And as well as thanking our presenters, I do want to thank our webinar sponsor, Citrix Online, for providing the GoToWebinar tool that we are using today. And I do want to thank William Coonan for helping us out on chat. And I want to go ahead and thank all of our attendees today. Thank you for attending today's webinar. And again, Elliot and Jim, thank you very much. And if all attendees could be sure to fill out the survey that comes up when you exit today's webinar, that will help us in developing future webinars. So again, thank you. And in order to leave, you can go up to File, Exit, Leave Webinar. Thank you very much.